Hey, how are you? This is Chris Verselli. Hey, thanks for stopping by my website and checking out this video. You're probably here because you read my article in the latest issue of Play magazine about the difference between barefoot shoes and traditional shoes, and you want to get a little more information about how to make a decision as to whether or not one versus the other is appropriate for you, and kind of the steps to take to make the change if you are going to make one. So what I want to do today is I want to show you a barefoot shoe, or a barefoot style shoe, or a minimalist shoe is also another term for it, and just kind of show you the differences between this and a traditional shoe. Now what I would recommend is, if you have a shoe that you typically run in, exercise in, play tennis in, or just do some activities in, go ahead and grab it. Okay, pause this video, go ahead and grab it, and kind of compare it to the shoe that I'm going to show you, because I'm going to show you some of the differences that this shoe has compared to the more traditional style shoe. All right, so the shoe that I'm going to use as my example is a shoe that I actually wear. It's called the New Balance Minimus shoe. Now this one is kind of in between the complete barefoot style shoe and the more what they call minimalist shoe, although sometimes you use those terms interchangeably. But this one, because it has a little bit more padding on it, it's not really referred to as a barefoot shoe. There are shoes out there that have virtually no padding whatsoever. You've probably seen the ones that have the toe cutouts, the five-finger shoes, which I have had pairs of, and I definitely like those too. But these tend to be a little more versatile in terms of what you can do in them. I don't recommend using the total barefoot shoes to run on like concrete or cement, or doing a lot of activity on hard surface. That's really going to be more appropriate to do in a shoe like this. But let me just point out a couple of the main differences between this and a more traditional shoe. So one of the things that you'll notice is that it has a kind of a different style pattern to the plantar surface of the shoe. Now typically what you'll see the more minimalist shoes have is a surface that has spacing in between many of the individual padded components, and that allows it to bend a lot. Okay, so this one bends a lot this way, and it bends a lot this way. Okay, another thing about this is it's extremely lightweight. Okay, I'm not sure the exact weight, but it's probably less than a few ounces. Because this is designed to be that way, so that it's not going to alter the way that your running mechanics are when you're out doing stuff. Okay, the heavier your shoe, the more you're going to have to actually pull your leg forward to get your foot in front so that you can take the next step. And every ounce really does count. Another thing that's a little bit different here is the softness and the flexibility of the top of the shoe. Okay, so this one, it's kind of a cloth-like material that bends really easily. I mean, you can see, like, I can fold this thing up really easily like this. I can fold it up really easily like this. Okay, this thing moves and bends very easily. Okay, that's one of the main components of a minimalist shoe, and I'll mention why that's important here in a second. The next thing is that it has a very similar heel pad to forefoot pad ratio. Okay, you can see that the heel pad height is not that much different than the forefoot pad height. What you're going to notice on the more traditional shoe is that there is a much higher heel pad compared to the forefoot pad, and there's just a higher heel pad in general. Okay, so like this one is very short. Okay, what you're going to see on a more traditional shoe is maybe something that is maybe 50% or even double the height of this one. Now that does have some advantages, but it also has some risks. I'll mention that here in a second. But that's one thing that you want to be looking at on your shoe. What's the heel pad height to forefoot pad height ratio? Is it bendable here? How lightweight is it? And is the top flexible? Okay. So here's the deal. So when you have a lesser heel pad height to forefoot pad height ratio, there is more of a kind of flatness to your foot when it's on the ground. Okay, when the heel pad's higher compared to the forefoot, your foot is a little bit more angled, okay? It's almost like kind of putting you into a very, very small high heel shoe, okay? Now what happens is that because your ankle is pushed up like this, okay, you are actually in a different position completely when you go to push off the ground, okay? This does a couple things. One is it pre-positions your calf muscle, which is the muscle on the back of your leg, in a weaker position, and that's the main muscle that pushes your foot down as you propel off the ground, okay? So what that's going to do is it's going to give you less propulsion in your ankle, and you're going to have to use more of the muscles of your knee and your hip in order to get your leg forward. All right. Now, for people that have a pre-existing foot problem, like maybe you have Achilles tendonitis or plantar fasciitis, or you have like sesamoiditis, or you have some other type of foot issue that makes you kind of concerned about putting extra stresses on your feet, but yet you still want to remain active. You may actually benefit from a traditional shoe, because the traditional shoe is actually going to have your foot work a little bit less, and it's going to put a little bit less stress through the ankle, according to studies, and it's going to put more stress through the knee and the hip. Okay, so just know that if you make that choice to go with the more traditional shoe, that your knee and your hip, and even up into your low back area, is going to have more stress on it. Now, if you go with the more minimalist shoe, what you're going to have, like I mentioned, is your foot's going to be flatter. So you're actually going to have your calf muscle be in a better position to help propel your body weight. So you're actually going to have a slightly stronger propulsion, and you're going to be using more of your ankle to do it. So you're going to reduce the stress on your knees and your hips, but you're going to add to the stress on your feet. Okay, and when I say stress, that doesn't necessarily mean something bad. Okay, because your body weight is a stress that you have to manage every time you take a step. So if you weigh 150 pounds, you're gonna be putting 150 pounds of stress on your body every single time you take a step. Okay, and it's just your choice whether you want the majority of that stress to go through your feet, or whether you want it to go through your knees and your hips relative to each other. So you've just got to make that decision. So one thing that I would recommend, though, is if you do make the switch to a minimalist or barefoot shoe, do it gradually. Okay, the biggest issue with making that switch is that your body has not grown accustomed to those shoes, okay, because it's used to having the stress of your body weight distributed in a different manner. And now if you make the switch all of a sudden to a more barefoot or minimalist shoe, it's going to be overwhelmed by that change if it's not done gradually. So what I would recommend is that you just build into that very, very slowly, okay? So if you're a runner and you're running 3 times a week in traditional shoes, try just running once a week in minimalist shoes and the other 2 in traditional shoes. And every couple of weeks, add 1 run in with the minimalist shoe, and then just slowly make the change. Now you're going to have to really monitor this, because you may end up finding that certain parts of your body are going to be a little bit sore initially if you make that jump too quickly. So you're going to have to really pay attention to those warning signs. If you start getting kind of sore and it persists, then just back off, get a little extra rest time, and maybe try to do things a little bit slower. So just be smart about it, be wise, get some help, get some coaching. If you work with a tennis coach or a running coach, that's great. They'll help you with, the mechanics of the activity, but they're not necessarily going to help you with the mechanics of what's going to be best for your body in terms of preventing injury and minimizing stress on the joints. So you're going to want to work with somebody like that. Okay, now here's the other thing to keep in mind, that shoe changes are not magic bullets, okay? Just because you have stress in your feet doesn't mean it's going to just go away if you make a shoe change. If you have stress in your knees or your hips, doesn't mean that it's going to just go away if you make a shoe change, okay? You've also got to do the necessary things to help preserve the integrity of your joints and your other tissues. You've got to exercise, you've got to hydrate, you've got to get optimal rest. If you have muscle imbalances, you need to address those. And if you're not sure what that is, and you want to find out more about that, check out my book, which you can get a free copy of on this website, and look at some of my television interviews, which you can also see mostly on the media page. Okay, because muscle imbalances are actually one of the most influential factors in our orthopedic health, and most people do not realize that, and they do not take the necessary steps to correct those imbalances and to prevent for those imbalances. Okay, so you definitely want to check that out if you've got any kind of recurring injuries, especially if you make a shoe change and those injuries don't get any better. Okay, so but if you have any questions about the shoes, where you should get them, what type you might start with, you can shoot me an email. My contact information is here on this site. But the New Balance Minimus shoe is a great one to start with, and they do have varying amounts of padding on the bottom side, depending on the model that you get. So if you make a switch from a real rigid, real heavily padded traditional shoe, you're definitely going to want to start with a model that has a little bit more padding, work your way down to one more like this that has a lot less and is super flexible. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful for you. Email me with any questions, and have fun picking out those shoes. All right, so see you next time. God bless.